words, writing, written content. It's most of what content marketing is about, the written word. But there are huge gaps between good and great. A lot of stuff just gets no traction at all. A lot of stuff is just such low quality, it's not even worth scanning. There are huge differences in the written word. That's our topic for today. Great written content matters.
Yes, it does. And I got you fired up. For those of you that don't know, Andy and I tend to talk a little bit before we go on the air, and we're a little fired up today. Yes, certainly a great way to kick off the show. There are certain ingredients, and we're going to talk about those ingredients that make written content great and worth publishing and worth sharing and, worth encouraging other people to publish and share and so forth. And so I was asked once to take that apart, create the recipe. That's why I call them ingredients. And so what would you put in that recipe if asked to create great written content? What goes in that, Mr. Writer, Mr. Blogger, and content marketers coming at you? So I came up with 14 of them. And first and foremost, I had to say purpose, right? Because sometimes I see content, I go, I don't get what they're trying to say, I don't get what they're trying to do, I don't get how it maps to a marketing objective, and so therefore, it lacks purpose. That's right.
It start with why, Simon Sinek style. So unless it's got a clear point for the business, unless it's got a clear point for the reader, unless the headline indicates some kind of benefit, unless it tells you why you should be paying attention to this, don't expect any attention at all. I think it should be answering a question. It should be like a how-to thing. It should or offer some educational value, offer some insights, some strong opinion, something that gives the reader some benefit by paying attention to this. So you should know. It should be obvious, and you should be able to summarize in one sentence, a single short basic sentence that tells people why they should care. You know why you're writing it. You're not just talking into your keyboard.
Yeah, chances are that's going to help you write your headline and selling proposition and perhaps call to action. And then the reader should, be able to echo it right back to you after having read it, or you blew it. You didn't strike the purpose.
Yeah. So let's say the purpose of this podcast is to help all of our listeners incorporate those critical aspects, those key ingredients into their written content to get better results from the very next thing they publish. How does that sound?
That sounds very purposeful. Maybe you could have said it faster, but my next ingredient is relevance, right? And so that's nothing new there, but again, you can separate the good from the bad, and maybe even throw in the mediocre or the poor by finding people just being too broad and not being relevant enough. And that's usually a matter of understanding exactly who you're talking to and what pains them and what pleasures them.
And then next you've got on the list education, which I kind of mentioned, the helpful stuff, the how-to stuff. I've read this, we could find the research and share it, 80% of all searches are information searches, people looking for help in getting something done and how to do something, and it's they want to learn. So that has a lot to do with why people use the internet, why people turn on a browser, and why people go to their computer. So I think the content that is educational, helpful, informative, that's a key ingredient in content.
Yeah, what was in the pregame show here today? You said something about answers, right? What was
answers? Yes, answers. Content that answers questions. This is a page out of Lee Oden's playbook. Content that answers questions. It's almost always going to work, right? It's like vetted. It like makes sense. It's got a reason to be on your site. And I say this isn't just for written content for content marketing stuff. This is written content for the sales pages, the money pages, the pages that convince people to buy. This is useful for direct response copywriting. In some ways, a good web page, sales page, product page, service page should emulate the sales conversation as if they're talking to a salesperson. In other words, that page needs to answer the top questions of the prospect.
Right, very good. It's what brought you there in the first place, right? It's what brought you online, especially search, but maybe to a forum and maybe social media. You have a question. So you're going to wind up on the page that has an answer if the content marketers and the search engines of the world have done their job. Okay, so we've hit purpose, relevance, and education. And fourth ingredient in my nutritional label, which you're just going to have to hear for now, but you will see on the pages where we publish, is emotional triggers. And that is great content speaks to feelings, right? It makes you feel something. It makes you feel happy. It makes you feel sad. It makes you feel curious or interested or excited excited or shocked.
Mm-hmm.
And that's marketing for you, really in a nutshell. You have to remind yourself about it when you're writing some data sheet about some technical widgety thingamajigger. But ultimately, people's decisions are made based on emotions.
Yeah, and I think that you're really good at this. You didn't even put it in here, but one of the ways that you can make your content a better emotional trigger is to simply not soften everything. Something to not include is those non-nutritional fillers that people put in content and that people writing add all the time, right? They use lots of qualifying statements and they get to it in a roundabout way. You can make your content more emotional just by being more concise, more direct, and without fluffing it up too much.
Without fluffing it up too much. It's maybe a sequel to my nutritional ingredient is dangerous ingredients in your written content.
Good one, yeah. Those fatteners, those sweeteners, those things that we don't need. The empty calories.
Marshmallows.
Fluffernutter.
All right. Next ingredient says timeliness or timelessness. Interesting thing to say there. I think it's not easy to make news, and a day later, usually it's not news. And then you create useful content by creating evergreen content that will always be useful. And so in between is the stuff that's late for the party. So I say great written content is either timely or timeless.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's an excellent point. It's either like newsworthy and ephemeral right here, right now, or evergreen. Your next one I'll cover here, you got truth, which is quite simply put that it is validated. Sources are cited and that you backed it up. You backed up your content with facts. You've added evidence. You've added case studies. Actually, you've guest blogged all over the internet, and you and me both have a passion for that tactic. Do you ever pitch to an editor or you submit an article and they say, this is good. Can you please add examples? I get that a lot. I think that's one of the most common things that blog editors give to guest writers is that request. Can you please add more examples? What they want is more evidence. What they're asking for there, more truth.
Yeah, I have got that. I guess I'm sensitive to that now to the point where I usually don't lack for examples. But yeah, there's certain bloggers or there's certain blog publishers that won't do without it. I actually got one rejected. I'm thinking specifically about Unbounce because it wasn't, data driven enough. So yeah, I didn't have data to tell the story I would have had there. But yeah, I think this is a major flaw with those that create weak written content. When you look at people throw in kind of loose abstract statistics at you that were based on another post and they can't find the original source. And I see that like 80% of the people never read your body copy. Well, David Ogilvy said that about print advertising about 50 years ago. I'm not saying he didn't say it. I'm not saying it's not true. I'm saying it's not. I read that almost every time I read a story about headline writing, and it's not that valid.
No, that's a good point. It's just imagine if you wrote that on Wikipedia, the next editor would come along and in superscript it would say citation needed. That's what they do on Wikipedia. Well, I'll add to that point here about truth, and we could go into this in a lot of detail, but those sales pages, great written content on those sales pages, what do they need? Evidence, statistics, examples, case studies, social proof, testimonials, endorsements, all those things, right? That validation. Never make a marketing claim without supporting it with evidence.
And it's not that hard to do. I mean, you can't always get, a first-person testimonial with a picture or a video, but you can always get something. Have plan A through E on your list of social proof and find one of them. And over time, you are going to get, the pinnacle of the social proof that you need. All right, so let's move on. Next, I have EASE. EASE is an important ingredient. You talked a little bit about whether or not we should include design principles here, and I guess this is as close I get on my list, is that it should be, your content should be written such that it facilitates the speed reading, the skimming, the going backwards, going whatever order you want, getting people's eyes into it so that it is consumed.
Totally agree. The next one is originality, which sounds really hard. I've got a good shortcut for it, or it's kind of a long cut. It's really, really difficult to make something that is unique on the internet these days, since I think there's something like 3 million, citation needed, 3 million posts that go live per day. But, what I like to do for originality is to publish a tiny piece of research. So if you wanted to say, for example, that you're making a claim and you want to support it with evidence, whatever it might be, or you want to publish something that's just unique and hasn't been published before, a survey, right? Or gather some data and do some analysis and publish that soundbite statistic, that number that only you know, that only exists on your site because you made it. Research is a great way to publish original content and a key ingredient on great writing.
Yeah, and don't publish unoriginal content. That doesn't mean don't tell a story that's popular and being told. Like right now, because Instagram's coming on strong in the advertising space. It's the sweetheart of social media posts, why you should do Instagram advertising and how. And so if you serve a social media persona, you probably shouldn't skip that story because it's a popular story. You should just bring something original to it. And I say, the rip and write thing. It's like, oh, I got this great story, and it's basically scrambled words of this other great story. That's unoriginal. Bring at the very least, bring yourself to it. Bring your opinion to it. Get a quote.
And here's the shortcut for publishing great written opinion. Ask yourself this question: what is the one question that no one in my industry is willing to answer? If you go there, if you have the guts, originality is partly about courage. If you have the guts to say what other people are kind of unwilling to say, or you have a prediction, you believe that something might happen, but other people don't think it will, if you say that, you just made something original.
Good one. Voice is next as an ingredient. We've kind of just touched on it, right? Your voice might be bold. It might be confident, it might be funny, it might be snarky, it might be sarcastic, it might be empathetic, it might be, a lot of different things, but I think it's something that you develop, and therefore if I read, a story about this, and then the same writer B writes a story about this, and writer C writes a story about this, like any brand, I want to be able to cover up the author byline and go, that was my favorite because of this, that must have been written by Andy or Barry or Ann or Jay, or somebody who brought their specific voice and personality to their written content.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. This next one on your written content informational ingredient label here, I can't take. This one's yours. Great headlines. Barry, that's you.
You've never written a great headline?
It's not my type. You're the master of this. Go right ahead.
All right, thank you. Well, it's kind of a no duh, right? It's the stopping power. It's the invitation. I like to say that the headline, whether it's presented as a subject line or a tweet or just the top of your page or post, it's sort of an invitation to the party. And if it really does it well, it's sort of like the party already started, before you got there, so you're excited because of the headline. And so we could give rather extensive headline lessons, and I think we actually have. So let's just say that great content has to have a great headline, and it's certainly an area where you should focus on before you hit the publish button.
Yeah, and go back. It was one of the early Content Matters episodes, and it touches on a lot of the things we've mentioned, relevance and education and purpose. Friendliness is next on this list, avoiding buzzwords and jargon. A good friendly post means a post that people can jump into right away. It's a post that is accessible, although that itself is kind of a buzzword. It's a post that doesn't get fancy on itself. It doesn't try to be more than it is. It's just simple and direct and uses those fresh, usual words that people use every day. Don't get yourself that speech impediment that writers have, like that grad student thing of just replacing every word with a more complicated word. Great content uses short words, short sentences, and short paragraphs. That makes it much friendlier.
I love the speech impediment thing. I was going to throw in the curse of knowledge, as Marcus Sheridan and others call it. And I think the key there is to remind yourself that you're not talking to yourself. Mm-hmm. So being knowledgeable can be dangerous, and you need to filter that through. Well, I'm here to teach. Is this going to be friendly enough to be understood?
Mm-hmm. Totally. Direction,
yeah, you got to tell people what to do. We do content marketing. One of those two words is marketing, and sometimes we get so generous we forget that we're trying to move someone further down the funnel or into a conversation or a demo or so forth. So, when you do content marketing, remind yourself you're doing marketing and tell people what to do after they read your written content.
Mm-hmm. And then also, of course, the great content on this ingredient label has got to be shareable. It's got to be shareable, content that moves. And that means that it has those little hooks. It's got the content is written in little sound bites that are easy to share. Use block quotes to pull out those things that make for great tweets, great posts. The click to tweet button is something that you see a lot on feldmancreative.com. Share buttons at the top and bottom. Barry called me out for this recently. My blog doesn't have share buttons in the top. But I think that it's absolutely true. We have to empower our audience to help promote the content simply through being shareable.
Yeah, what I called you out on is a little tip I picked up at a blog world several years ago, and that is that when the inspiration to share strikes at the beginning, the end, and in between, a lot of people don't make it to the end. So there is a little bit of a risk factor in having your share buttons only at the end, and those that scroll with you or stay on screen usually outperform in terms of share numbers.
Yeah, I believe it, but I'm trying to be exclusive. I'm making you work for it. You got to scroll down. Put in the effort, Barry. Come on.
Well, I think that's actually makes for authentic sharing, right? It's people that actually are at the bottom of the page, which suggests they read the post.
Right. But as we know, there isn't a correlation between reading and sharing. Now, last point, go ahead.
Last point I probably should make you do, because it's I have the word optimization, and search engine optimization isn't the only way to optimize content, but what I meant when I wrote it was search engine optimization. It should be touched and finessed to the degree where a search engine is going to help you make it discoverable.
Agreed. Use the target key phrase in the title, in the header, and in the body text. Probably a time or two every 500 words or so. Simply indicate the relevance for the topic by using the target phrase. Hey, look at that. It's time for mousetraps and cheese.
Right on. Okay, let's talk about a little cheese here for a tip about content that, in my mind, relates to the topic of today, written content. I want to move forward from the headline to the lead. Often spelled like lead and often spelled like lead. The publishers decided along the way to spell it L-E-D-E, and they don't even mean the same thing sometimes. Sometimes it means the first sentence, sometimes it means the first paragraph. So let's just call it the opening passage. And the way to do that with written content, the surefire way to do it well and to compel people into reading the sentence that follows and the paragraph that follows, which really is the goal of everything you write, is to get people to keep reading, is to make an emotional connection with that person by stepping into their zone, into their needs, into their pleasures and pains, thinking like they do. If you look at some of the great bloggers, the people from Copyblogger, Damien, Sonia, I'm sorry if I leave anybody out, but the list is long, Jared, Pamela, and then if you look at John Morrow, who's one of my favorite bloggers, right out of the gate, he usually has a question, or he says, "Are you feeling this pain?" I just wrote a post about homepage headlines, and I said, "Are you struggling to write to organize your homepage? Do you know what should go on it?" So it's almost a yes or no question, and that's a very effective tactic for writing a lead and for making your written content more compelling.
So strong. I've got a mousetrap tip. Mousetrap tips are, from me, they're usually about some kind of conversion. If we think about sharing as a conversion itself, this is an obvious way to get more shares, and it's the cornerstone of influencer content, and it's something that I've been a huge fan of, another Leoden playbook trick, collaborative content, including others. They call it ego bait, and it works like this. You're writing an article, you're recording a podcast, you're doing whatever you're doing in your marketing, and you want to make it a better piece of content, and you want to add quality, and you can do so by simply including the voice of others. Reach out and ask for a quote, a contributor quote, from someone who's an expert on the topic. When you include that quote in there, put their picture, their name, their link, their Twitter handle, and the blurb from them. Now when it goes live, simply notify them that it's there and watch what happens. There's a better than even chance that they're going to share that for you. He wasn't doing it just now, but Barry just mentioned Sonia and Pamela and Jared and Damien and Copyblogger and John and at what was Boost Blog Traffic. He just Smart Blog. He just changed the name.
Yeah, that's right.
But that's a way to include other people in your content. And then when you simply, it's a way to say thank you. It's a way to build relationships. It's got powerful networking benefits, but it also has this tendency to increase sharing. Why wouldn't I promote that to my network? I'm included in it. I fall for ego bait all the time. Simply put any of us in anything, and we're very likely to promote it because we have some stake in it. We're proud of it, and it benefits everybody.
That feels like an alley-oop for which I need to slam dunk the iTunes review and rating. If you get a chance, if you like this blogcast, is this a blogcast?
That's a good word.
If you like this podcast, give us a review. We asked for it once, and it worked a little bit. So like we said, written content should have direction. Podcast should too. Our call to action is to review us on iTunes if you wouldn't mind and you like this program.
Well done. And I'll also add another one here. Go to either of our websites, feldmancreative.com or orbitmedia.com/blog to see the nutritional label, this little infographic. It's beautiful and scannable, and Barry made this here, and it's a way to jump on and go through this kind of list that he made. You can see the percent daily value for each of these. Spoiler alert, they're all 100%.
Coming soon, fattening stuff that don't belong in your as ingredients in your content.
I like that a lot.
What'd you call it? Fluffer?
A fluffer nutter. It's like the empty calories. Yeah, it's maybe a post about editing. Hey, what's next week? What's in our next episode?
We got a cool idea we discussed, and that's going to be helping our listeners identify topics to blog about or topics for which they can create original killer content for.
Topic about topics. I love this one. This is going to be good. So that's it. Thanks for listening to Content Matters. As always, appreciate any kind of reviews or shares, and word of mouth kind of makes the world go round for us. Again, this is Andy and Barry from Content Matters, and we will see you in 2 weeks.